Dr. Richard C. Miller, we are kicking butt and taking names and, or what is it? Kicking butt and chewing bubblegum, and we're all out of bubblegum. Your book is fantastic. There's so much to it that I'm gonna have to read it multiple times to even get it, let alone for the vocabulary, but like the concepts. I've ran across Rank-Raglin, or the idea of the Raglan hero archetype. And this I came across in Dr. Richard Carrier's work, showing like mythic and heroes who become gods and all that kind of stuff, demigods, and how they might fit into this category. Can you tell us what the Rank-Raglin hero archetype is? What are you bringing up? What's your use of it here? Because his use of it, it's deeper than what I'm putting, but he's using it in the context of like, did Jesus exist? And he's saying, look at this category and how many people fit it. And mostly of them are mythical rather than historical in his estimation, things like that. Whereas you're using it differently, I think, than that. And then we also can get into the dreams thing. So
yeah. Well, so it's all in the same section here in the book. There are a couple points that I want to traverse with that. One is, I think Raglan sometimes he's get pushed aside a little bit, is kind of not taken seriously. No, this is serious. Basically, what we're dealing with on the anthropological level. And so anthropology is what can we know about what humans are up to that transcends cultures and times? You know, what are the things the patterns that seem to recur no matter which culture you're in? And that's the study in a broad way. I mean, there's more ways of talking about anthropology, whether you're talking about cultural, ancient anthropology, kind of the origins and how myths evolve over time. There's more to it than that, but that's the basic project. And so what can we learn then about heroes and the journey of the hero and this sort of thing in storytelling across time? Raglan goes and tries to point out, and this is his specialty. This is what he was doing. And so he goes and points out, I don't know, what is it, 17 or 18 different...
You want to read those?
Yeah, let me read them. These are the elements of the hero pattern, according to Raglan. For those that haven't heard this is good stuff. The hero's mother, this is the first one, is a royal virgin. His father is a king. That's the second one. Third one, often a near relative of his mother, but, fourth one, the circumstances of his conception are unusual. And, fifth one, he is also disputed to be a son of a god. Sixth, at birth, an attempt is made, usually by his father or his maternal grandfather, to kill him, but, next one, he is spirited away in some form. Next one, reared by foster parents in a far-off country. Next one, we are told nothing of his childhood, but, next one, on reaching manhood, he returns or goes to his future kingdom. Next one, after a victory over the king and or a giant or dragon or a wild beast or some other villain. Next one, he marries a princess, often the daughter of his predecessor, and, next one, becomes king. Next one, for a time he reigns uneventfully, and, next one, prescribes law, and the next one, later he loses favor with the gods and or his subjects, and, next one, is driven from the throne and city, after which, next one, he meets a mysterious death. Next one, often at the top of a hill. Next one, his children, if any, do not succeed him. Next one, his body is not buried, but nevertheless, next one, he has one or more holy sepulchres. That's the end of the list.
So what is I've never studied him. I've only ran across his argument from Richard Carrier's work, and I still was fascinated by the whole idea. This sounds mythical. This sounds like a fiction, like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or something. Like it could fit into that. Or I think of King Arthur or some like slaying of a dragon type thing. Because a lot of those things, I'm like, yeah, Jesus. Nope. It went off and didn't line up with Jesus. So he must be researching and looking at other stuff than just Christianity. And maybe he didn't even really factor in Christianity that much.
He didn't. Well, he didn't include him in the list, but he did score other figures throughout other cultures and so forth. And none of them got them all. there wasn't, I don't think any of them got everyone all the way down the line. Some of them only maybe half, or less than that. But nonetheless, he picks up on some of these. And so he scored a variety of figures. Here's Oedipus, Theseus, Romulus, Hercules, Perseus, Jason, Bellerophon, Pelops, Asclepius, Dionysus, Apollo, Zeus, Joseph, Moses, Elijah, Watu, Gnung, and he goes on and on. So there's a variety. But Alan Dundas, a more recent folklorist who I respect deeply, has also included Jesus to the score, and Jesus scores fairly well under Dundas his analysis. So it's just I don't think it's I think it's more than coincidence. I think this is exactly correct that these kinds of story patterns recurred over and over again and again from a literary kind of linguistic signal standpoint. This is the way that this kind of genre or storytelling would have helped people get their heads around what type of story they were reading. When they started to see these kinds of motifs, they were like, okay, yeah, I kind of get it. I know what we're getting into here. But just to be clear, though, this happens. It's interesting that this can happen across so many different cultures. And that's where you get Carl Jung and the archetypes and theorists trying to say, well, maybe in our mind, we're just kind of pre-programmed to start creating these kinds of story patterns in some way, even from birth.
So I would go along with that. Now, I wouldn't necessarily do it in some esoteric way. I would do it in a purely naturalistic one, and maybe even a physiological, neurological, scientific approach.
Yeah.
And suggesting like we're wired, literally we are wired in our mother's womb to recognize face. There's facial recognition systems, cognitive systems that are developing that help us know the face of our mother, hear our voice. We're literally wired to listen to the voice and become prone to the mother's voice. There's so many things that we weren't taught that come automatically. And this brings me to Rank-Raglin, but also into the dream thing. Before we get to the dream thing, I want to make something that I have been fascinated with about religion and why I think it happened.
Okay.
Why it happened, period.
Sure.
I feel like it's like this arm that grows from the subconscious and the natural what we are. You're going to get into dream and why do we watch TV? Why do we have this? Why do we have pastime? Why do we read? Right? Why do we have literature? All of that plays, I think, a part in what you're going to get into. But death. Mm-hmm. If I think about why people have postmortem appearances, why these legends built up, it's so common. You can go to several doctors that'll tell you the most common thing is that a loved one who died, they still sense that they're there. They sense they're around.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we embellish and create stories that come from a natural yearning of our loved ones? Or what about ancestry worship? Why aren't we worshiping ancestors? They're still around even after they're gone. In some way, oftentimes people experience them. So that there's some science behind that I would say, rather than taking some ontological, esoteric approach or something to believing it, I think there's natural reason. Death, birth, you get into dreams. So anyway, get into whatever. Take it where you want.
1,000. And when we're all too human, I don't know what I would go through if I was on the battlefield in the foxhole, if I was on the hospital bed with all the tubes out, hanging out, if I was going through this or that. I do know that a friend of mine took his own life some years ago. And I'm a very naturalistic person. I don't believe that, in anything. Belief is not part of how I, construct my experience in the world. But like 3 or 4 or 5 days later, I was out jogging one night and I could have swore this guy was kind of talking to me in my head in some way and telling me that, because I was pissed off that he had done this, but found out that there were reasons and that those reasons probably I might have done the same thing if I was in his shoes. And so I won't want to get into that particular story, right. But this particular moment that I had was kind of an encounter with that my brain, this is my neurological explanation, had constructed that internally as almost an internal, partitioned voice in my head that I was having dialogue with. And it felt to me real and compelling in some way. And I went home and I even had to sit down. I was running. I had to go to the park that was nearby and just sit myself down because I was tearing up thinking about what had just gone on. And so where do we find religion showing up? In the most difficult areas of our life. I don't know if you've seen Life of Pi.
Yeah. Oh, I love that
Great movie. Yeah. And that's kind of the idea is they're it's all a myth, right? It's all kind of an analogy because they're trying to sugarcoat the harsh realities of life, that this was, a boat with people, cannibalism and people getting killed. It was nasty. And basically you end up with my dog barking. So with Life of Pi, you basically end up with, sugarcoating the harsh realities of life, and even it brings in towards the end this idea that maybe that's what we're doing with the God idea. And so the pill is too hard to swallow for us humans. And so it's not surprising that you find religions in every culture. It's not surprising that you find these different kinds of problems taking place and being resolved by religion. Where do you find religion? You find it in births, you find it in marriages, you find it in deaths, you find it in sickness, you find it in animal sacrifice, you find it in these areas that are viscerally either upsetting or just hard to process in terms of the major life events that a person might have. And so it's not surprising that we find also ubiquitous throughout different religions this idea of transcending some of the most grievous limitations of the human experience, death being, maybe the worst of it all.
Oh, this is so good. One comment, then I want to get into this dream thing and I'll bring it up, but you can emphasize. Life of Pi was amazing. So if you haven't watched The Life of Pi, you need to. I'm not kidding you. At the end, you start to see what in the world, and I like how he phrased it. I loved the actors too.
Yes.
And that main actor at the
Great
end,
movie.
crying in his eyes. He goes,
yeah.
So which one do you prefer? And he's like, the animals. And it was like, the same is true of God.
Yeah, it was like it was like a sucker punch, wasn't it? It was like boom,
so deep.
Boom. Yeah, it was excellent. It was a great movie and a great, powerful point. I wish I knew more about where that point came from. I didn't do any.
That was just amazing.
It was just an amazing way to express that. I think really that's the punchline of the whole movie. Really, the where he really nails it.
And as a naturalist,
yeah,
I'll tell you this: I'm a naturalist. But I live with a narrative. I do have a narrative in my head about my life and me. I have an internal voice that I speak to myself. And it was actually that voice, I realized that still small voice. It was always me. I thought it was God. Like I thought it was Jesus. And I'm sure I'm bringing it out of you, brother. Hallelujah.
So I'm going to be all too human here. I'm back in my more religious days, back in my faith days a little bit. It got absurd. That voice transformed, and I'm going to everyone's going to criticize me as a madman, but I'm going to just be like, we're going to lay it all out there naked a little bit here. Jesus was helping me find parking spots at Target, helping me to select whether I should get a cheeseburger or a hamburger. That still small voice was guiding me through this and that, whether I should, helping me get my parking spot more quickly so I could get my latte or whatever. Right. And at some point it's like, okay, and why isn't this master, metaphysical supreme power doing something more meaningful with his or her time in this world, right?
Sounds almost like a human's voice.
That's what I was trying to do. Like, I'm fussing over the parking spot. That's me. And as I started to get involved in Buddhism a little bit, well, guess what? Buddha had a lot of the same voice too. It's like, okay, whoa. So that voice, and I began to realize, okay, this is a psychological partition that I'm creating that, and in fact, you could even control it yourself in some ways. And so there's an insanity in that I think I need to call out. So,
I think we all have a little bit of that, but that's part of the wiring of the brain, I think. But I realized that narrative, it was me. It's like the footprints in the sand I always describe. And I go, when you were down there, I carried you. That's why you saw two footprints. Right. It was me. And so I look back and do that, and I thought about dreams. You said something different, like interesting. Why do me and my wife, or you and your wife, go and sit down and turn on a stand-up comedy show or watch TV?
Well, before we move on from that last topic, I do want to say something though. This is the sincere. People need to be able to find. This is a difficult life. It's hard to be human, really hard, for most of us. And I have the most privileged life imaginable, probably. And I'm not having an easy ride. I can't imagine how many other the people that are going through this world. Some of them have lives that incomprehensible. The kind of demoralization and difficulty they have to go through this world. And so the idea that we're constructing alternative narratives to help us cope with that. This is all too human, and I have compassion for that. I understand that. I get it. I've participated in it myself. And so I don't want to dismiss that as just something that's completely a joke. But, and I want to know, I would like to see grandma again.
Of course.
Who wouldn't,
I wouldn't mind if this wasn't the end. I mean, when the ends, right. I don't want it to end. I'd love to say there's something more. I've said this before. I'm one of those guys. I'm thinking you and me are a lot alike on that. But this isn't dismissal of people believing and hoping and wishing. We are coming to these conclusions not in a mockery or a purposeful I just want to be a contrarian. There's certain data, there's certain evidence that's drawing us to think that makes the most sense of our observations of the world. The world is, Neil deGrasse Tyson said it really quite well. He said, the universe is not meant to make sense to us. It's not made to make sense to us.
Yes, thank you.
And so, come to find out, we evolved? What the heck? Hold on. You mean to tell me that humans weren't always humans? That we were some other creature?
What a revelation, yeah.
That'll change your game, because the idea that we were something else at some point in our timeline, it is so...
And I propose to you that that's a minor revelation, that if we knew, and I don't think it's within the human mind to know ultimate reality, the actual, what's really going on here.
Right.
I think that's beyond, our brains would short circuit immediately if we even began to get into that.
Or we might not want to live anymore.
Right. But I think, though, that what I want to do, though, I think a lot of naturalists want to reduce the world to this kind of mundane machinations of this heartless world. And yes,
nihilism and all that.
That's there. But I honestly also think, though, that if we knew the actual reality of what was going on here, it would blow our fucking minds. It would be beyond what we can even, and it would make our myths, the things that we tell each other to cope with this and that, look like children's stories. And they would be silly by comparison. And so the idea that by having a naturalistic kind of perception or a scientific idea of the world, that kind of reduces the world from being, from its, mystery or charm or its, wonder. I just don't hold that view. And so in that sense, I'm kind of like Carl Sagan or Neil deGrasse Tyson. I see something wonderful there. I see a wonderful, it may not be made for us to comfort us necessarily, but that's no less amazing and spellbinding. And so that, to me, I love the scientific enterprise. I love James Webb. I love all the things that are going on right now in quantum physics. Right now, science is moving at a pace that it's never moved before. And the breakthroughs that we're going to see just in our lifetime are going to be amazing. And that, to me, that's the pursuit of truth. That's the human pursuit of truth. But yeah.
You were bringing up dreams, and just to point out, it's no wonder we spend countless hours a day wanting to watch a TV show with our loved one, wanting to get immersed into a narrative and lost into a world. I like video games. But I like them, but I don't ever get to play them like I want to. So I'll watch TV shows with my wife, because that's at least something we can cooperate and find a way to meet in the middle on. Whereas nothing, I'm going to get real weird here for a second on camera. Nothing is more exciting to me than going and finding out a new Fallout video game comes out, right? It's a post-Armageddon war game where you're born in a underground vault. You are raised by your mom and dad, but your dad disappears one day under tragic circumstances. The alarms are going off, and they said your father escaped the vault. Now you have to go into this post-apocalyptic world to find your father and figure out why. But your mom died giving birth to you, sorry. Your dad's the only one raising you. Then he disappears, leaves you in there. You got to go find him. So you go into this world, and you find this post-Armageddon. There's like literally radiation death through all this water stuff. There's people who are murdering people on the roads to steal their stuff. And you're out here picking up anything you can find to be a weapon to survive. And I am this character in this game.
Yeah.
I'm not me. I'm an avatar now. I am lost in this world. It escaped reality. I think that played a part as to why I used drugs all those years. There was a sense it numbed me from the scariness of reality, from also the traumas of my life. I had to live in this skin. How I got from there to here is a miracle to me. I mean, that's a naturalistic miracle, how I was able to get there, you know. But just weirding out for a second, I love that escape. And you pointed out that there's no wonder we dream. And just in the theory of dreams, you bring this up in your book. Like I'm thinking, but it's resurrection and reception. What the heck is that in early Christianity? How's that got anything to do with this? It has a lot to do with just the whole cognitive understanding of humans and what we do, why we do it.
Yeah, it really asks prior questions in some way. What are we up to? If you unpack some of the most fundamental aspects of the human experience, you think about laughter, or the idea of play, or the idea of entertainment. As soon as you get underneath some of these words, you start to realize there's a whole lot more going on here than what looks like on the surface. Why do dogs play? What are they up to? Well, the same thing of why kids sword play, or, you know, why we might want to get into a video game and kind of immerse ourselves in an alternative kind of world. This is entertaining to us. In other words, we're neurologically wired to feel pleasure in this experience. Why? It's rehearsing patterns that we valued in our deep psychology that help us towards survival, that give us a sense of meaning, that help us be more connected with others, that give us more urgency around different priorities, and this sort of thing. It rehearses those psychologically. Now, what's going on in dream? Well, in those other contexts, like say, watching a movie or a film, when you're dreaming, in those contexts, rather, that's a controlled medium. Somebody's a producer, there's actors or whatever. That's a context. It's a video game. There's programmers. There's people writing all of that. What's going on when you're dreaming? Well, that's not a controlled environment per se, at least not at a conscious level. But the same thing. And so the most recent dream theory, and I would get into that there in the book, basically says that we've been mistaken for all this time. Why is it that we're rendered vulnerable during the night for so many hours as a species? What's the payoff there that gives us such an evolutionary advantage for doing so? That's a pretty big toll. That we need to be unconscious for long periods of time while nocturnal animals are running all over the place and other tribes are trying to attack us and whatever. What's going on there that the benefit of that process is outweighing the dangers and risks? What's going on there? We need this, right? And so what they found is that while you're dreaming, your synapses are rehearsing. It may seem like a jumbled mess, like your brain is on rinse cycle with a couple of shoes in there tumbling around, coming up with absolute nonsense. But what's really going on there is it's rehearsing certain synaptic patterns and grooves in your mind that it thinks, based upon your experiences that day and up to that point, are going to better prepare you for the next day. And so when you don't have that quality of sleep the next day, like they did some research with someone skiing, they went skiing one day, that night dreamt, may or may not have had skiing in their mind as they were dreaming, but then the next day they're going to ski better. Now, if they don't get that kind of sleep or whatever, or have that next day to kind of process it, and then go for like a couple more nights, their skiing ability isn't quite as good, because they didn't do that. And so they're finding that because of quality of sleep and so everybody get their sleep, because this is preparing you for the next day psychologically, arming you up for all the things your subconscious thinks you're going to be needing to gear up for. So that's an uncontrolled medium, and sometimes some very interesting things. You know, you might meet your parents, you might be on the moon. I've ridden a bicycle with like upside down in the air and all kinds of stuff. I've had many dreams of me floating and this kind of thing. Well, what's going on there? Well, that's what's going on. Is it so in that way? My mind is somehow preparing itself for there's something about that kind of a story that helps me to better engage and to be better squared with whatever I'm up against the next day. And so, yeah.
Thank you.
I hope you liked my dad, Richard Miller, in this interview. Remember to like and subscribe. And never forget, we are MythVision.